Welcome to the fish tank.
Hey everybody, Fishman here, and welcome to another video. I thought I'd start this video off by showing you two of the tanks from part 1. This is how they're going to sit on the rack, and the important part here is the orientation for those holes. When I plumb them, the piping is going to go down on the outside next to the vertical uprights for the stand, and that way it keeps them out of the way. And the other thing is, these holes are drilled an awful lot lower than I've drilled any of them before for my fish room. And the reason for that is I want to be able to do hopefully less frequent water changes, but larger ones. So as I said many times for this rack, this is my rack for doing experimentation on, and that's just one of the things I want to try out. In part 1, I'd asked you guys to leave comments below that would cover any kind of questions you guys had, as far as, aquarium making, that sort of thing. And you guys came through in flying colors, and I'm going to try and answer as much of that as I can as possible. While I'm doing that, I'm going to put this tank together. This is the same as all the others. The only thing different in this build will be I'm going to put it together as if I were building it for a client. So I'm going to tape up the edges and make everything look a lot cleaner than if I were just putting it in my own fish room. Now you can see the piece on the bottom, that's the back. The one I just had up there, that's one of the ends. And as I tape up the back piece here, or the front, depending on how you want to look at it, you have to make sure that you allow for the thickness of the end piece, and also for the bottom, to make sure that the tape doesn't get stuck in the bottom. And then on the back end, you just tape up the whole thing, just to keep it nice and clean. And then on the end pieces, as you'll see as I get to them, you don't have to worry about that. You just have to allow enough room for the bead to spread. So, getting to the questions. The predominant question, the one that everyone asked, and I should apologize because I did a lot of cutting and pasting for answering this, because there was an awful lot of them. Most people were interested in, why do I raise up the bottom of the tank when I'm building it? It is raised up, you can see there. It's about half a centimeter, I think. The actual amount that it's raised is not too critical. It's I use egg crate a lot, so I just tend to use that now. The reason for it is, a number of things. First off, when you squeeze the silicone out, you need a place for it to go. If you squeeze the bead out and it's sitting flush on something, it can't squeeze through, and you end up with a lot of bubbles. So that prevents that. The other thing is, if you put the bottom of the tank actually in contact with the stand, and if you have an issue with the stand as time goes by, where either the stand warps as it sits, when you have a heavier tanks, like, it's not so big a deal with this sort of thing, but heavier tanks, they tend to settle into the floor. And then when that happens, because floors are uneven and how they're built is uneven, and sometimes even how stands are built is uneven, you can end up with a twist or a part where the stand is not staying true and flat, and that will put pressure on the bottom plate. And that pressure can easily cause, and result in a crack and that sort of thing. And the other reason for raising them up, keeping them off the bottom, is when the sides go down like this in the back, the weight of the tank goes all the way down the sides and is transmitted to the edges of the stand. And if you look at almost every stand made, and especially the ones I make, the support structure for the stands is always right near the edges, and that way it just transfers the weight really nicely all the way through the whole thing. And that's pretty much the reason why I do it. A couple of people were concerned that it makes the bottom weaker, but like I said, I've been building, well over 1,000 tanks, I think, over the last 30 years or so, and I've never had any issues with bottom problems. Commercial tanks obviously use much thinner glass than I do. This is 6 mil glass, and it's only a 15-gallon tank. It is way overkill, and I tend to build a lot of my tanks in that kind of frame of mind, because I think it's much better to be able to sleep at night not worrying about any tanks leaking. And that's my goal when I build stuff. So hopefully that answers that question. And then the next one, most common, was how do I determine what size glass to use? And this is a really complicated question. These are the details I take into account when I decide, when I'm designing an aquarium, like when I'm going to build a fish tank. This is what I think about when I'm doing that, and that is how many gallons it is. Well, the main important part of that is the more water it holds, the more weight it holds, and therefore the more pressure on the glass. So you have to take that into account. Next is, what's the longest free span of glass? In other words, how far is it from one piece of glass, from either corner to corner, end to end, that isn't being supported by anything? Like in this case, it would be the back of the tank is the longest, and that's 2 feet. And next, and probably the most important, is how tall is the tank going to be? Water pressure is actually mostly due to how high a column of water you're trying to support, and that puts the most pressure on the seams. So, all right, this is usually my rules of thumb for building a tank. I mean, I don't build a lot of small tanks except for ones for myself. Anything under, let's say, let's call it 20 gallons. I think I have some 30-gallon ones in my fish room. If they're just for my own use, 30 gallons and under, I use 6 mil. Not tempered or anything, I just use regular 6 mil if it's for me. If it's for a client, I always temper a glass. And the reason for that is sometimes there are small bubbles in glass. It's part of the process of making it. And when you temper them, if there's a bubble, it blows up in the oven, and then you don't have to worry about it. That eliminates that flaw. And it just makes it a little bit harder. You have to be more cautious, obviously, of the edges and stuff like that, but it just allows for, I don't get tanks that crack. Let's just put it that way. Now, as far as bigger tanks go, it gets more difficult. Let's just say we're dealing with, say, 40 to, say, 75 gallons, and we're keeping under 2 feet. I would use 10 millimeter glass, and again, if it were for a client, I would temper it. And if it were just for my own use, I wouldn't bother. I mean, I have tanks here that are over 100 gallons, and with 7 feet of free span of glass, and they're at a 10 mil untempered, and they're perfectly fine. It's just, how much overkill are you comfortable with, I guess is what it comes down to. Now, once you get above the 100-gallon mark, then we're getting into tanks that require more support. I mean, if you go through my 175-gallon reef tank build or the river tank, then you're getting into those styles of builds where I put a lot of extra support into things. Most because, as I said, I don't like surprises. I want these things to hold water. I'm sorry about the fingers, by the way. For at least 20 years. That's my plan, and that's the reason why I build them the way I do. Now, when you get up into the really big tanks, that tank in the my intro video there with the African cichlids and the coral, that tank is 12 feet long, and that is out of 3/4 inch tempered glass. And that particular one is now 6 years old. Its sister tank, which I built going on 16 years ago now, is about a foot shorter, but it is also still holding water. I mean, that's the important thing. So I hope that helps. It's, like I said, kind of generalities, but unfortunately, without specific dimensions and conditions that the tank is going to be in, it's kind of hard to give exact details on that. And the reason why I'm focusing on the seam right here is someone asked me how much silicone do I leave in that little space there between the two sheets of glass. And it's really hard to show you. I was trying to move the camera back and forth a little bit, to show the translucency of it, but like I said, it's a feel kind of thing. Hopefully that helps. Someone else wanted a close-up of the seam anyway, or actually close-up of the work a bit more, and hopefully those handheld ones did that. By the way, hand holding the camera while I'm taking these pictures is just really difficult. I really need to do something about that, because I end up smudging some of the silicone on a couple of seams simply because I'm trying to film with one hand and pull the tape off with the other, and it is definitely a nuisance. So while I just give you yet another view of the same thing I've been showing you all along, I'm going to try and cover the last couple of things. Someone wanted to know what brand of silicone I use. Unfortunately, my favorite brand of silicone is no longer available. The one I've been using for most of my tank building career. It's only been about a couple of years ago that I've switched over to a new brand, and that's not long enough for me to recommend something. So unfortunately, you guys are on your own for that. Just make sure it's 100% silicone. And like I said, no additives, like obviously. Nothing for bathtub tile, that sort of stuff. Anything with any anti-mold or antifungal is not a good idea. A couple of people are actually interested in why custom build at all, actually. It's not cheaper. I mean, it is cheaper when you get into the larger tanks. Once you get above about 120, 130 gallons, and you're getting into like I said, the bigger, more complicated builds, it is actually way cheaper to build than to buy. Custom tanks from any kind of shop is just way more expensive than doing it yourself. But then again, you're getting into a lot more risk as well, so that's entirely up to how you do that. Smaller tanks like this, this is a 15-gallon tank, it's more expensive to build yourself. Most of the reason for that is, in this particular case, I mean, it's all polished edges. The glass is almost twice as thick as you would get if you bought one off the rack kind of thing. So it is more expensive to build. But you get to build what you want. And that's the reason why I do it. Well, besides the fact I like to build stuff. If you build it yourself, you end up with what you want. That's my main motivating factor right there. So anyway, I think that's pretty much the end of this. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the style of video, please like and or subscribe, and we'll get a lot more of these as we go along with this particular rack, because there's going to be a lot of focus on it. And I will start showing more of the other stuff after I get back from my trip, but for the moment, we're just going to stick with this. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, and bye for now.